Hello, everybody. I'm Michele Grant. I'm one of three directors at a destination consultancy called Blue Sail. And we specialise in working with visitors and tourism and the visitor economy. And both in the UK, in Ireland, and occasionally, when we're lucky, in France. And we were really delighted to be asked by the National Forest to help them through the thinking around the tourism growth plan. And I've been in tourism for very many years, and sometimes I get accused of being a bit cynical by my colleagues, and because I sort of think, oh, we got another one of these, or here we go again, or whatever. And what I've been really genuinely enthused and excited by what I've seen happening in the National Forest and by the brand that they've got. So it's been a real pleasure in thinking and about all of this and working with the team on this. Okay, I'm going to take you through just a very light touch sort of overview of what the plan is about, and I know the document's going to be available to people to have a look at in the future. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through the context and the evidence for the plan, talk a little bit about the brand, because that's really underpinned a lot of what's going to happen, and the focus for the work in the next decade. Look at some of the target markets and the trends around those, and then at what the ambition of the plan is, and finally some of the priorities and recommendations. So this is just a run through of some of the things that was our starting point really for thinking about this. Previously, there's been a gap analysis undertaken, and many of you will be familiar with that because you would have been part of the consultation process that occurred around that, and there's been extensive business consultation on that. And the gap analysis was to think about, well, what does the National Forest need to do if it wants to grow tourism? And what would that look like? What are the investments that need to happen, both for existing businesses and for new activity? And that piece of work then raised for the National Forest some further thinking, which was around, well, where do we sit? Who are our markets? What are we actually trying to do, and how are we going to do that differently so that we stand out and we're clear about that? So they began to look at some of the trends and influences around that. And as a consequence, then looked at their markets. I'm going to come on to that in a minute, about what are the different sorts of markets. Why will the National Forest be different to some of the other rural places that you can visit? And that then led to the brand development, which sort of underpins what happens next. So what I want to start with is talking a little bit about the brand, because it's very much, a lot of people think of brands as being a logo or a set of colours that you use when you're developing something. And of course it does have that dimension, but a brand should actually underpin everything you do, and it should underpin your thinking. And the brand for the National Forest is about the personality of the place. Because, you know, if you're a visitor, why come here? You could go to the Peak District or the Lake District or to anywhere really to experience rural areas, couldn't you? So why do you want to come to the forest? So it's about it being woodland, and it's about being a very special type of woodland, and it's about these four things. And they're all emotive things. And Kurt earlier on was talking about people wanting to have experiences, and this links in with that. It's about how you feel about something. It's not just the things that you do. It's not just the things that you go away and say and spend money on. It's about how you feel about those things. It's about feeling inspired, empowered, which is often quite an important and undervalued thing sometimes in the connecting. It's about connection and it's about grounding. So it's about connecting with the people that you care about in your life, and it's about being connected with the forest. So you can read these words in different ways, but what is important about them, they're all about how you feel. So it's about the experience. And the hashtag Forest Life and the logo that goes with that, which many of you will be familiar with because that's being rolled out now, is something that underpins all of this. And the use of that will begin to communicate what those things mean. What do those values of this brand look like? And Richard's going to be talking a little bit more about marketing and promotion afterwards, so that will pick up a little bit more detail, I'm sure, on the brand. But that brand thinking has to underpin everything in the growth plan. So although it's about marketing, it's about other things as well. It should influence what happens, be it in development or management of the place. All of that should be influenced by trying to communicate and amplify the brand and what that stands for. So these two, there are 4 target markets, and many of you will be familiar with them if you've looked at the marketing strategy which the National Forest Company has. So I'm just going to touch on them now, or at least on these 2, which I suspect are the ones most familiar to people here. The fun families and the easy active adults. And these are really important markets, and these are the people who are coming now. And it's important that they keep on coming and they come more, and they spend more, and they stay longer and do more things. So they're very important core markets. And these are sort of pen portraits. They're actually abbreviated pen portraits. There's slightly more detailed ones about what these people are like and what sort of things they like to do, what are their characteristics. So the fun families are people living in urban areas, about an hour's drive from the forest. Their parents in their 30s or 40s. They've got younger children. They're looking for things that will appeal to younger family members. Some of them are multi-generational, which means they might be traveling with grandparents as well. So you've got to provide a range of different things to cover different age groups. They're price conscious, but they've got some money to spend if you give them the right offer. And of course, they're after a great deal. And we heard about that importance of added value from Kurt earlier today. The easy active adults are couples. They're people 50 plus. Some of them might be retired and able to visit during the week as well as weekends. Others are still working. They're quite comfortably off. So again, some spend opportunities there. And they're looking for, well, the name gives it away. They're easy active. So nice flat areas to do a bit of cycling, easy walking. They don't want to climb a mountain, but they do want to keep fit and enjoy time outdoors. The second 2 sets of markets are the ones that we've focused a bit of time and thinking around because they're a little bit different. And they're the ones that actually provide a rather interesting opportunity for the National Forest because the sorts of things that they want and that they're seeking, the National fit really well with the brand for the National Forest. So these are really important markets. Now, they're not totally separate from the 2 markets we've just looked at. There's actually some really good connections. So new traditionals, they're couples and families, so you immediately see the connection with the first 2. And they really like doing things together. It's about that connectedness. They are wise spenders, but they will pay for the right experience. So if they feel that they get what they're looking for about being healthy, which is really important to them, about investing in improving the environment, about giving back, in whatever form that might take. So it might not just be giving back money, it could be giving back by raising money for a charity, for example, through an event, that sort of thing. They're quite community focused. They want to see that bigger picture of where they fit in and the communication, if you like, not only with their own family and friends, but also with the environment and with other wider community. And we did a little bit of work on that because that's a sort of pen portrait and it's a descriptive market, but how many of them are there? Where are they living? What sort of people are they? So we did a bit of an analysis of a segmentation model called Mosaic, which for many of you here might be familiar, but for those it's not. It's one of about 2 or 3 that's very widely used across the UK. And what the segmentation model does is it looks at groups of people by particular characteristics and looks at how many of them there are in different locations. And it does that by using a whole raft of different data which it sub-segments and looks at. So it gives you, as the user of that system, some really interesting information about where your target markets might live, where they're concentrated, how many there are of them, and that sort of information. Now, new traditionals is, if you like, something that has been thought about and specifically for the National Forest. It isn't a mosaic segment, but it aligns with several of those segments. So we took a look at those, and we estimate there could be as many as 4.5 million people in the UK that might well fit that sort of description. Now, they're not all going to come to the National Forest because it could result in terrible queues of traffic on the roads, but there are quite a concentration, hotspots of them, living within an hour and a half of the National Forest. So they're really warm prospects. They're nearby. Think of all those short breaks that Kurt was talking about. So they're good for that. They're good for day trips. And they're also very much wanting the sort of things that the National Forest in particular can offer them. The other group are the special interest groups. And these quite often get forgotten when people talk about markets, because people say, oh, well, they're very small numbers of people and, they'll come anyway, and they sort of get pushed to the bottom of the pile. But actually, they are very important, particularly when you think about some of the businesses that you're running, which are all about special activities. They're about different sorts of things, which actually often appeal to special interest groups. Some of the special interest groups are quite big. Walkers, cycling, groups, they're actually quite large percentages of the population. So some of the examples of those sorts of people are runners, photographers, ramblers, cyclists, bird watchers. There's hundreds of others that there could be. And what's interesting about them is not that they do those things, because many of us might occasionally dip into doing those things. The fact is that's their passion. So it drives the destination choice. It drives where they choose to come. So the great thing is that what this growth plan needs to do is to be saying, well, we need to ensure that we deliver for those people the things that will make them choose here, because they know they can do them and do them in a great environment and get really good facilities. Okay. So moving on from thinking about the markets, what's the ambition of this growth plan? I think that's actually been touched on this morning in a number of different ways by different speakers. So I've sort of condensed down an ambition statement really into 3 bullet points. And the first one is to realise the brand. So think of all those emotive things. Think about it being a special woodland place in the way that we do business, in the way that we choose to invest in, and how we work together. So it's about the National Forest and all the partners. So I'm not going to say the National Forest Company. It's about, obviously, the people in the company, but it's about everybody in the National Forest thinking around the brand and using the brand to guide priorities. So what would that mean? What would that look like? So this comes to number crunching time. In the next 10 years, the ambition is to grow the visitor spend by 15%. So it doesn't matter what the numbers are. People often talk about, oh, we want so many more visitors. But actually it's about how much they spend. So having a lot of visitors that don't spend anything isn't actually going to benefit the forest. It's actually probably going to create more management issues. So it's about spend, and that might be people spending longer here or spending the same amount of time but spending more. And it's about new visitors as well. And that's a higher growth target than has been achieved in the previous decade. So it's ambitious, but having looked at it quite robustly, and we've all had long conversations about how you do this and what percentage that we should go for and why, this feels ambitious but achievable, and that's the key thing. And that will create and sustain 700 new jobs. It's quite a lot of new jobs in the forest. Again, think about Kurt and some of the growth predictions. That's quite a big chunk of those jobs that are generally being told about as being growth in tourism nationally. So what's the growth plan actually covering then? What's the meat of what's going to happen? And we've got 4 things here. It's about a critical mass of things to do, because if you want more people to come and more people to choose it, they have to feel there's enough choice. So if you say, well, there's 3 things I want to do, but there's only 3 things that I want to do, actually, the reality is that's not enough. You need to see 8 or 10 things that you want to do, knowing you're only going to do 3 of them. And that's just the way we are as human beings. We don't want exactly the right thing. We want opportunities and choices all the time. Quality is really underpinning the brand. And so that's going to be a really key element of this. And a year-round experience. Because if you want to grow tourism in the National Forest, then it needs to be done sustainably. And part of that sustainability is actually spreading the season. It's more sustainable economically for the businesses, but it's also sustainable in terms of the environment, because then the visitors are spread out and enjoying that environment over a longer period of time. And that means also more places to stay, and moving from day visitors into having a higher proportion of people who are actually staying. And again, thinking about Kurt's talk and about him talking about people doing those short breaks, that people may travel for those quite short distances. You don't want to spend all your time, if you're only going away for 2 days, you don't want to spend very much time getting to the place to enjoy it. So some of those urban catchments, if you like, relatively on your doorstep, an hour and a half, 2 hours away, are good for that as well. But you need more places to put people up. So let's just sort of touch on some of the elements of each of the categories of things. So things to do. Well, the National Forest Company is invested in the National Forest Way, and we heard earlier about some of the things already happening. It makes sense to really maximise that investment of that asset by concentrating more activities, developing circular routes off the way, encouraging businesses to do other things, both new businesses and existing businesses that are close to the National Forest Way, and really focus on that. And also to support that with other activities, those core activity things about cycling and walking in key woodland. Activities. By activities we mean specialist, small key things that people can dip in and out of or come specifically for. Earlier today we had some examples of bushcraft and craft skills, those sorts of things. Activities that people can do, have a go at, or be very passionate about. It can be either end of the spectrum, but more of those sorts of activities that are about the woodland. And again, it's about reinforcing the brand. Visitor attractions. The starting point has to be to encourage all of those attractions that are already here to continue to invest in their attractions in the future, and to help enable that to happen. And that's both about creating the support businesses might need, but it's also about creating the right economic environment for it to be worth businesses' while. And so that has to be the starting point. But also to deliver some new attractions, on brand ones that reinforce what the National Forest is all about. Those are not to compete with the existing ones, they're to create more choice, and particularly year-round ones, by which I mean things that are indoors as well as outdoors. Festivals and events. There are already festivals and events happening, but having a special event, a special festival that very much belongs to the National Forest, that is of that brand, is going to be a key part of the plan. And also more events generally, and pushing up the positioning of those events is going to be really important, both for promoting the National Forest, but also for getting people here and perhaps experiencing it for the first time or experiencing it in a different way. Places to stay. The plan is about woodland accommodation. Lots of other things will happen. There will be, generally, hopefully, new hotels developing in the boundaries of the National Forest. But what the National Forest needs to focus is on special woodland accommodation. That can be in two ways. It might be, this picture quite nicely illustrates it, quirky, if you like, woodland type accommodation. And that can be of scale. It doesn't need to be small, very small scale levels of development, though it can be. It should be a mix of the two. But it needs to be about the forest. And it can also mean some of the towns having accommodation that the way they do their food, the way they present their offer is very much connected to what the brand's all about. So it's of the forest. And it's also, again, about existing businesses and how they will invest in the facilities they have and the quality. You can have all the most wonderful facilities in the world, but actually people visit places and they want to connect with people and the places that they're in. So we've talked about the forest as a place, but obviously there are a number of towns also that are in the forest. And it is about it's about a number of things. It's about getting more businesses generally to be sort of embracing the brand and using it in ways that suit their business. And the growth plan, and this is already moving forward, is going to produce some brand guidelines to help businesses do that. It's also about delivering really thriving businesses. So it's about helping businesses to understand what that involves and helping them perhaps stretch things and look at new things. And it's about maintaining that quality, because if that's of a benefit to everyone, to raise the quality all around, and so that everybody's buying in to the same level and the brand really means something. You know that if something's connected with the National Forest, that it will have a particular brand quality, and you can be confident of your colleagues who are also using the brand, that you can collaborate with them because you know their quality will be the same standard as yours. The places element. I love the term forest towns, and it's one that the National Forest Company use, and I think it's great. So there are places that are towns that are sitting within the forest and trying to bring more of the forest into those towns. Wouldn't it be lovely if more businesses said, you know, I want to locate in one of these towns because it's in the National Forest, and I want to align what I do with that brand, so I want to be located there rather than somewhere else. But it's also about good destination management as well, so that that's a core thing to get right for the visitor. And that may be simple, straightforward things, but that will be that's part of the focus of the plan. More widely, it's about signing interpretation. That was mentioned earlier on in terms of the signs to the National Forest and that you're in it. But it's also about, on a much more nuanced level, the signing across the National Forest, both as a communication tool, but also in ensuring that the quality of that, the interpretation around that, is really adding to the whole experience. And so you get a sense of you always know that you're in the National Forest, and it's helping you explore further. One of the other sections, as you will expect to see in the growth plan, is about marketing and promotion. I'm not going to say very much about this because there's already marketing strategy and some of the things are moving forward for that. But just these are a few things that are really important. Brand guidelines comes up yet again, so that's very much a key part of it. The digital-led approach. Kurt was talking about children being absolutely attached to their mobile phones. But everybody, in fact, I think it's about 80% of people, will plan a trip online. So digital is where it's at. So it's about moving to more a digital-led approach to all the promotional activity. Also, people, while they're actually on a trip, are communicating with people, putting stuff on Facebook and using other social media channels. So it's about collaboration around all of that and pulling that content together meaningfully and using that as an opportunity. So it's about an integrated approach to all of the different strands of marketing, and also about a smarter package of the forest offer, so that people are not they can actually plan their trip, and that's going to be particularly important for those short breaks as well, understanding how they can pull things together to make a little package of things to do. And working with the forest-friendly brands. And we had the example with the water, which is not a tourism example, but it gives us sort of sense of the sorts of things that certainly the National Forest Company want to see more of, the opportunity to work with those sorts of companies and organisations. So really, to finish up, right at the end of the plan, one of the key things it talks about is collaboration for growth. So the National Forest Company has asked us to help them pull together the tourism growth plan, but it's not their plan as such, it's everybody's plan that's got an interest in making the National Forest a successful destination. And it can't be delivered without everybody getting involved. And so there's a big call to action there in the plan for everybody to become engaged with it. And I think that's probably a very strong message that hopefully you will see runs throughout the plan, that it's very much a pulling together. Thank you.